We are back. You are chatting with John P. Today we are going to be talking about Breitling, both the watches and as a company. People ask me all the time, is Breitling a good brand? Does Breitling produce watches that are going to go up in value, go down in value? We're going to set aside that and talk about some of the recent watch releases that Breitling has come out with, and also where they came from, their strategy, and why I think that watch collectors that have been collecting for a while should look at Breitling and give them a second chance. But first, please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. I know I was making 2 videos and launching 2 videos for a week for, probably the last year. Now I've kind of tapered it down to 1, getting into the thick of some projects that we're working on here at Delray Watch, delraywatch.com, by the way, where we have so many watches, including Breitling, so please don't forget to check that out. But I've been just so busy working on projects behind the scenes. So for the next, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, it'll be 1 video per week. But after that, I do intend, as we do build out a new studio, we're moving offices. So we're going to kind of up the production quality a lot, and Fed and I, and introduce some additional personalities as well. So keep your eyes out and ears open for that. On the wrist today, I have a vintage IWC 666, the 666 reference. I love this. Beautiful ingenieur from IWC. Very cool watch. Looks like, go figure, the somewhat modern version of the vintage collection IWC ingenieur, which we've had so many times, though this is the original size, smaller than the technically the reissue. And reissue is also something we're going to be talking about, and reissue is why I think Breitling is doing so well. The interesting thing about Breitling, for those of you not familiar, is Breitling is actually much older than Rolex. Breitling was founded in 1884, whereas Rolex was founded in 1905. So even though Breitling had a head start, Rolex certainly has surpassed the market and gaining the attention of collectors and those that are not even just watch collectors, just the luxury goods community in general. And the thing to keep in mind is that Breitling has always focused on chronographs, professional watches used for keeping track of time, more so than just the actual time, but actual timekeeping, timing specific things. And that's what Breitling has always been known for, and that's what they're even kind of trying to revitalize when you look at their current product lineup today. And so over the years, Breitling was just kind of another luxury brand of watches, or even before they became considered luxury watches, they were just watches, right? People needed watches to tell time, but eventually they became a luxury brand and moved up market with the rest. But roughly 20 years ago, Breitling started having some troubling times. They just weren't gaining as much momentum. People were just gravitating towards other brands that were coming out with more watches and product lines, and Breitling started losing speed. And so along with Breitling, by the way, this is not something that only Breitling suffered, but so many brands out on the market had to dump their watches at huge discounts. This is something that still happens in the industry today. That's why when you go on websites and you see watches that are brand new or unworn at these huge discounts, it's because the brands make too many or they don't sell on the shelves. And so this was a huge problem for Breitling. Either they overproduced, or it was just, the customer was going in different directions, maybe buying Rolex and some of the other more popular brands within the last 20 years as more brands came out and more models came out and people began collecting watches and not just looking for a luxury item. And so Breitling just dumped so many watches out there, and with that, their pricing went down, their secondhand value went down, and we talk about watches should not be an investment, right? But the reality is, when something is worth 10% what you paid for it, that's just not a great thing for a customer to know for a luxury good or any good. And when they compared it with other brands, they went in that direction. It was kind of a recursive cycle or a feedback loop. And so eventually Breitling kind of got on so much trouble with this cycle that other brands have also fallen into, and being independent and not having the cushion from these luxury houses that own many brands and kind of can prop up the brand or have partnerships. They were bought out by private equity with someone from the original family retaining ownership, eventually selling. And this was in 2017. You have CVC Capital Partners, which bought out Breitling. And when they did this, almost immediately they dumped all of their old product lineup on the market. And what we saw in 2017 and around that time, even a little bit before, as Breitling got into more trouble before private equity, they just dumped so much inventory on the market and the prices of Breitling went so low. And unfortunately, with that came along the perception of quality. Now, Breitling watches always were of luxury quality, right? At the end of the day, it's not like Breitling reduced their quality. They still were a Swiss watch manufacturer with all the right people. In fact, Hans, our watchmaker here at Delray Watch at our service center, he worked on movements like the B01, helping design and being instrumental in the repair and some of the troubleshooting with some of the issues it faced early on. But also he was a technical director for Breitling, so he worked in so many other products and projects inside Breitling. So they are and they were at the time especially, a true watchmaking house. And so it's interesting to note that the prices just tanked so low, but eventually, and that takes us into where we are today, Breitling has entirely revamped their product lineup, their strategy, and how they aim to collect and attract the attention of watch enthusiasts. Now, if you go to Breitling's website today, and by the way, just announced today, you have a brand new version or collaboration from a kind of like a motorcycle apparel / motorcycle company called Deuce or Do, depending on how you want to pronounce that. But nonetheless, they have this really great partnership with the Chronograph Seconds Hand being a lightning bolt. I really love the colorway of this top time. But what Breitling has done, in my opinion, is they've become a micro brand. Now you look at their website, they have a web store. Now there are many big brands that don't have a web store, but what you saw in the last 5 years is kind of the advent and the ability for anyone to start a watch brand using manufacturers and using kind of OEM Swiss watch manufacturers, start a Swiss watch company. For example, consider Manta to be an example of a brand or a micro brand that's really kind of pushing the mainstream old world brands forward in this kind of way. And so what we see is Breitling, they have the online shop. Just the overall look and feel of the website is very micro brand, right? You go to some brands' websites. I mean, you can even go to a brand like Panerai and it just seems so overproduced, so over the top. Everything is so specific, for the lack of a better term. Go to some of the brands, go to Rolex, and you get a little bit of an air of like pretentiousness in sometimes with these brands. When you have Breitling, it just feels like a more inviting atmosphere in that online shopping experience. And when you also consider this is something that's happening with the way that they sell these watches retail, even before COVID, Breitling, I went to a Breitling boutique and it's almost an experience. They have different foods and drinks that you can just have there as a customer. Now, this was specific to the Breitling boutique at the Aventura Mall in South Florida, but I'm sure that this carries over and you can look at kind of the look and the feel of these boutiques. It's inviting. It kind of conveys what the brand and the spirit is all about. It lacks that kind of pretentiousness, and that's a trend that I've also noticed developing. I mean, you can see it completely exemplified with the way that we do business at Delray Watches. There's more transparency. There's more kind of that friendly watch geek or collector atmosphere, and this is something that's branching out into other brands. You see Oris has done a really great job at kind of going this direction. Omega has been tiptoeing their feet in that direction, though they're a little bit nuanced in that they do compete directly head to head with Rolex, and they do serious investments in their watchmaking facilities as well as the production quality of their watches and movements. I'm not saying Breitling doesn't, just not as much as Omega does, but you see Breitling kind of trying to go digital, trying to go media, and making that micro brand play. And with that gets the authorized dealer cut out. And this is something that I've been saying the watch brands need to do for the longest time. The reality is, if you walk into an authorized dealer, now I have nothing against authorized dealers, but if you walk into an authorized dealer, there's no guarantee that you're going to be treated well. And if someone wants to buy a Breitling watch, they look on the website, they say, walk into this authorized dealer, the brand can't control the customer experience. So it's more so, it's not so much as the brand wants to make more money, because I'll get to that point. I don't know that will be the case. I think it's the experience, because in the age where anyone can leave a comment anywhere, everyone has a voice, one person says something bad about Breitling watches on YouTube because of an experience they had at an authorized dealer, that looks negatively on the brand. So if the brand can control that, they can ensure that the customer has a better experience, which conveys onto the product, which is a luxury item, because at the end of the day, these, while they are utilities and instruments, a lot of times they are toys or hobbies or collector's items, and it's something that needs to be delivered. When you buy something like this that does have considerable price, is the whole experience for the customer needs to be considered. And so I've been saying this for a long time. The brands, they're going to start cutting out authorized dealers. Other brands have already done this, and it goes on and on and on. What this also means is it helps the brands, including Breitling, protect the value of their watches, because now pre-owned is so popular. It's growing every day. It's a great way to get models that once existed but no longer do, or it's also a great way to save money. I mean, we at Delray Watch, we certainly know how that works. That's literally what we do. So when you consider pre-owned is growing, the prices that these watches are selling for with the Breitling watches is really important to convey how much prestige or how luxurious the product is, right? Rolex selling over retail. People think it's the most luxurious, the best brand. Audemars Piguet, Royal Oak over retail, Patek Philippe, so on and so forth. So even if Breitling can just prevent their watches from trading at 10% of the price pre-owned, even bump it up to 50%, probably not, but maybe over time, right? 20, 30, 40%. And I think that's a big gap and a big step and a big jump that George Kern, the current CEO of Breitling Watches, would have made for the company, who from the last 20 years was selling watches that were perceived to be low quality because of their very low price compared to the retail. Now, I just mentioned the one Top Time watch that I'm very excited about. With that Top Time watch, it's online exclusive. So kind of rolling back into what Breitling is doing with the authorized dealers, it's online exclusive. So maybe their list of 200 authorized dealers in the United States or something like that, thereabouts, maybe they will get this watch, which apparently, based on, feedback online and from friends and collectors, this is a watch that's really hot and people like it. A lot like what you saw with some of the reissues they did as well, or the Super Ocean 57 for the limited edition Surfer with the kind of the brown dial with the faux Tina, or the pretend lume aging. Nonetheless, very cool watch. But you see the demand for these special editions, and now the special editions are going to be limited to online only. So something interesting I think we'll see is the prices on Breitling. They'll just have to go up. Without the authorized dealers dumping the watches they have on the shelves, the prices will have to go up. I think that also means Breitling can produce fewer watches because they have to sell fewer watches. If they can retain the price, they cut out the authorized dealer, the middleman. Even if Breitling lowers their retail price, they can be more competitive against other brands like Rolex and like Omega, who haven't quite yet done that. Rolex only has authorized dealers, right? Omega has authorized dealers, and I don't really see them pulling out as of yet. So they can be very competitive. And when you consider the Navitime or Chronograph 41, which is available at pre-order, the price is $68.50. It has a B13 movement, which is basically a $77.50. So it's nothing that's particularly cutting edge, but it's that 41 millimeter size, a little bit thinner than some of the other chronographs, and that's going to be going head to head with the Speedmaster Professional as well as the Daytona. It's certainly half price, or 25 to 24% of the price if you consider what it actually trades at of the Daytona. But it still allows Breitling to be competitive with their watches spec for spec, and they even will have the ability in the future to be even more competitive with the pricing. Though, I mean, Breitling is sometimes, especially now, guilty of putting, like, who are these celebrities, like Brad Clooney or something. Go to the Breitling website, one of these actors, I don't know all the actors' names, I'm guilty of that for sure, but they have like Brad Clooney or one of those actors, so he does not come at a cheap price point for sure. And not to mention, by the way, Tag Heuer, another direct competitor of Breitling, which was also perceived as using a lot of the same tactics, and their prices have actually gone up, whereas Breitling seems to be pushing a little bit on the downward end of that. So I'd like to see kind of how the Breitling / LVMH Tag Heuer push-pull scenario develops in the future, and what that means for this reissue strategy that everyone is using, and now Breitling is doing it. I'm really excited for the brand. We've had some current generation like the B01, the new B01 Chronomat come through the door here at Delray Watch, and I'm really excited for it. I think the quality is there. I think Breitling's head is in the right place. They want the attention of collectors. They're looking at cleaning up the gray market, even though, we're a little bit guilty of that as well. I mean, we do, trade in that space, but it's part of the watch game. I like that Breitling is trying it, and I'm excited to see what they do in the future. What do you guys think? Leave it in the comments below. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P. Ciao.